Again, it's good to be here with you here at the feast. These are God's feast days, and we're invited by Him, by His Son Jesus Christ, to come here and to worship with them in these special times. And it's a privilege and an honor to be here, to be called, to be chosen. It's up to each and every one of us to remain faithful. And we're here tonight striving to be faithful to our God and our Creator. I think God would be disappointed if we didn't start out tonight's a sermon or message without going to Leviticus 23. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We can never forget these days, this time, the meaning, especially as we're coming towards the end of the age. But in chapter 23 of Leviticus, verse 1, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, the feast of the eternal, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, these are my feasts." These are God's days, and they spell out a plan for us that we can take heart in and know and be at peace. We can be at rest, brethren, knowing what our hope is, what the future is. And God gives us these feast days to tell us, to teach us. In Leviticus 23, verse 34, he said, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of the 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto the eternal. And on the first day there shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work in it. For 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire to the eternal. On the 8th day you shall have a holy convocation, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the eternal. It is a sacred assembly, and you shall do no customary work in it." So it is near and dear to God. It is from God. It is sacred. And we are to follow His instructions on how we are to keep these days, just as Israel did. Let's go down to verse 39. He repeats it, "And on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep the feast of the eternal for 7 days. On the first day there shall be a Sabbath rest, and on the 8th day a Sabbath rest. And you shall take for yourself in the first day of the fruit of the beautiful trees, branches of palm trees, and boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days." So here we are. Israel was an agrarian society. And so after the end of the harvest season, they were to bring all the gathering, a tenth of their produce in. All the hard labor and the work that they did throughout the year, now it was a time to bring it in and to come before God. And we were to rejoice. I know our harvest, we left home. We're still in the middle of harvest. We always try to be done by Thanksgiving time at the end of November. So, we've got to go home and we've got to continue the harvest. But here, the harvest was complete. And they came before God with the blessings of God in all the work in the land that they tilled and all that they reaped in that great land that God gave them. It is a statute forever for them, and for us it is a time that we look towards the future, a time that we can, again, take heart in and knowing the absolutes in life. We, as human beings, we take things for granted. We just naturally, it becomes routine to us. and we go through things in life, and sometimes we miss the meaning of it. And we know the Sardis era of God's church didn't have the holy days. We know that Mr. and Mrs. Armstrong kept them for 7 years, they themselves not knowing what they meant until God revealed what they were. And so here we are. And there they are. I think actually the Sardis era, or the Church of God, Seventh Day, I think their headquarters is actually here in Colorado. And I saw a podcast where someone talked to them, and they call the holy days, those other days. They let their members keep those days if they want to, but they really still don't sanction them, from what I heard from the podcast. So, they lost those days, and God brought them back. They brought them back through Mr. Armstrong for us to understand and to see what our future is. And we should be so thankful. This should never be routine to us. This should be a special time and a special event as we see, again, the time of the end approaching. But as we leave our homes, brethren, we come here, we leave the world, we come to a place of peace and rest. This is a spiritual rest for all of us. For 8 days to get away from the world. I'd like to turn to Genesis, go back to somewhat of the beginning, but I'm not going to start I'm going to go to Genesis chapter 3. Now we know God created Adam and Eve, put them in the Garden of Eden, instructed them about life, sure. And He told them, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then He allowed the serpent, of course, to interact with them. And, of course, with that interaction came, unfortunately, the sin of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that God said not to. What was the results of that? As we turn in Genesis chapter 3, in verse 16. To the woman God said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow, your conception, in pain, and you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Then to Adam He said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and you have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it, or in hard labor, or exhausting physical labor. In toil you are going to eat of it. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat the bread. You shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of which you were taken. For dust you are, and dust you shall return. Another thing I have written in my on my Bible is in toil is hard bondage, because that's what it became. You look. Adam lived for 930 years. How would you like to have that on your conscience, of having children and having one of them kill his brother? How would you like to have that in your conscience, of seeing all the misery that would come to humanity, to the first 900 years maybe, or however long it was? They didn't find rest. They didn't find peace. And so today we live in a world that we come out of to come to a place of peace and rest. We leave a world behind that is worse than it was in the beginning with Adam and Eve. We leave a world for 8 days that's on fire. A time that is soon going to end, but yet we have to be patient, and we ourselves, God is training for the future. In Romans chapter 8, Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8, verse 19. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility or uselessness by none other than Satan the devil. Not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation, it groans and it labors with birth pangs together until now. Not only that, but we also who have the fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. So we see that the earth, the creation, is in a state of despair also. The moaning, the groaning. You know, we look at the earth or the hurricanes that recently came through. The devastation of Hurricane Helene, and now Hurricane Milton came through. Now I think there's a tropical depression or in the Atlantic again. But the destruction and the despair, the sorrow of humanity that has to go through that is because of Adam and Eve's, their decision to eat from that tree and that knowledge. So here we are. I know ourselves, it was the hurricane that came up through Texas this past summer. It was late June, early July, I forgot the name of it. Anyways, it came in so fast and so furious that it came up to northern Indiana and actually got us. Now, we didn't get the winds, so to speak. We didn't get what Texas had gotten or the southern states. But what we did get was the 6 inches of rain that had dropped off on us and then caused another weather pattern to come in and dropped another 4 inches on us in 5 days. And in 10 inches of rain, of course, we're flooded. And our fields are wet. There's water standing out there. Probably some of the worst flooding we've seen in many years. But this is what's happening. It's, you know, the earth, the creation is moaning and groaning because of sin, because of the sin. And it, too, someday is going to have a rest. There's time coming that we can be grateful for as we turn to Revelation chapter 20. Revelation chapter 20. Then I saw an angel, verse 1, coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for that 1,000 years. He cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal on him so that he would deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. A time that is coming when there is no more captivity, no more Satan holding this world and its people captive, no more him being the power, the prince of the air. No longer influencing what's going on. That 1,000 years, that God calls the rest. It's a rest for humanity. That they can have life, experience life the way that God wanted it in the very beginning. And they're going to be able to experience that. There was a time when God wanted to give Israel a rest. As we turn to Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 4. Yeah, I'll get there. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 1. Living east of the Mississippi, we have plenty of moisture in the air, so when we come out here and air is dry, and certainly affects my sinuses and the other things. But anyways, in Hebrews chapter 4, he says, therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, or the kingdom, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. So Paul talking here, we need to be careful. There is a rest coming. Don't fall short of it. So many people have fallen short of it. They're no longer with us. And that rest, they have no rest. For indeed the gospel was preached to us as well as to them, and that is to ancient Israel. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in those who heard it. For we who have believed do enter that rest, as he has said. So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. We know the story as we read. I'm not going to for the sake of time, but the story of Israel in the book of Numbers. Numbers 13 and 14, when God wanted them to go into the promised land. It was a land that was going to be a land of rest for them. He wanted them to go in. Moses sent, the spies out, and Joshua and Caleb, and they came back. They were 40 days. They went out. They scouted out the land, and they came back, and Caleb and them were ready to go. Let's go get it. It's ours. God has given it to us. And yet, the other 12 that went brought back an evil report. And so that's when God, they wanted to go back to Egypt. They wanted to go back. Their hearts, brethren, were not in it. So they, as we know, God, from 20 years older, they did not enter the promised land. They wandered 40 years in the wilderness. There was a time of rest for them to enter, and yet they refused it. There's a time of rest for us, brethren, that is coming. And these 8 days picture that time. And yet, so many have rejected it. God talks about a wonderful time that is coming as we turn to Isaiah. Isaiah 14, here Isaiah is talking about a rest. Isaiah chapter 14. I'm going to start in verse 1. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will still choose Israel. I read that. It shows, again, the mercy of God. That after all that Israel and how often how they rejected God, God is still going to choose them as his inheritance. He goes on to say he's going to settle them in their own land. The strangers will be joined with them, and they will cling to the house of Jacob. They're going to see the blessings that God gives to the house of Jacob, and they're going to cling. They're going to see it. and they're going to want to be a part of it. Today, tens of millions of people coming across our border, they're wanting to cling to Jacob. They're trying to get away from the oppression that they are suffering in, the poorness of the countries. They want to come here for a better life. And unfortunately, our government is bringing them here for a different purpose. But that's another story. They're clinging to Israel because of the blessings, is what I'm saying. That's what God is saying. Then people will take them in verse 2 and bring them to their place. The house of Israel will possess them for servants and maids in the land of the eternal. They will take them captive, whose captives they were, and rule over their oppressors. It shall come to pass in the day the Lord gives you rest from your sorrow, from your fear, from the hard bondage. Talked about that, God told Adam, hard bondage, is going to fill the earth because of your decision. But hear it again, it is hard bondage in which you were made to serve. A time of rest that God is going to give. In verse 7, the whole earth is at rest and quiet. Out where we're at, we can go out at night and we can, if there's such a thing, hear the quietness. It's quiet, it's peaceful. We walk through the green pastures where the cattle are. It's quiet and peaceful. In verse 7, they break forth into singing then. The earth is quiet. People want to rejoice. That rest is finally here. The oppression and all the things of the sorrow, the fear, the hard bondage, all of it is now a thing of the past. They want to sing. They break forth into singing with that joy, with that being off of their shoulders. And now they can live life to the fullest. They can receive the blessings of God and be thankful for them and enjoy them. And they'll see how great it is when we obey God and the blessings that come from God that make our life worth living, that makes our life peaceful, happy, and most joyous. Those are the times that we look forward to. In Isaiah chapter 11, we'll start in verse 1. There shall come forth a rod from the stem of Jesse, in Isaiah 11, verse 1, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Eternal shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Eternal. His delight is in the fear of the Lord, and he shall not judge by the sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. He's going to bring it into subjection. And with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his loins. God's law, which is a law of love. And faithfulness, the belt of his waist. Yes, in verse 6, the wolf shall dwell with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the young goat. The calf and the young lion and the fatling together. And a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear, they shall graze together. Their young ones shall lie down together. A peaceful setting. And the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the viper's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Eternal, as the waters cover the sea. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, who shall stand as a banner to the people. For the Gentiles shall seek him, and his resting place shall be glorious. It's going to be glorious because we just read how things are going to change, how the nature of animals, how the knowledge of God is going to fill the earth, and people are going to be able to understand their purpose in life, what God has in store for them. That's what it's all about. His resting place. There's going to be a resting place. There's not always going to be this contention and strife that we see in the world today. There is a resting place that he is bringing about. Turn to Psalms, if you would, 132. Psalms 132. Verse 13. Psalms 132, verse 13. For the Eternal has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his dwelling place. He has chosen Jerusalem. This is my resting place forever. God tells us, I am choosing Zion. I desire it. And this is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, for I have desired it. That time that is coming, that resting place that God has chosen for himself and for all of humanity. Let's look at that resting place. In Revelation, verse 21. Revelation, verse 21 and verse 1. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth has passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself shall be with them, and he will be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, no more sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. The things that we are experiencing today, the hard bondage, the things that are tough in life, those days are soon going to be gone. Well, it's going to be 1,000 years. The new heavens and new earth doesn't come till that time. But it is coming. The point is, what we see today is no longer going to exist. We see the strife, the contention. We just see all the evil in the world. God said it's going to be gone. It's going to be now my time. It's going to be my resting place. And this is what I'm going to bring about. No more death, sorrow, crying. None of that. Nothing but a state of happiness, a joy, of peace. Brethren, it starts here, and it starts tonight. What I mean is the rest, having the spiritual rest that God gives us. It doesn't start tomorrow. It doesn't start in the middle of the feast. It starts tonight. We have to have rest. We all have to have peace. That is what God wants for each and every one of us. Let's turn to Psalms 133. Nope. I think it's 133. Yes. Psalms 133, verse 1. Behold, how good and how pleasant, it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. As a parent, one of the saddest things that could happen is for our children to be fighting with one another. Children, listen up. Be kind to your siblings. I'm serious because, my wife and I had 2 children, and they got along, not perfectly, but they got along so very well. To this day, my daughter being 42, my son being 40, they love one another. They have an excellent relationship, and that makes mom and dad's life so blessed to have that. They have that harmony in our families. I've seen families where siblings don't talk to one another, haven't seen one another in years. Don't do that to your mom and dad. And we are the children of God here. How do you think God feels if we can't get along here? It starts here, brethren. It starts here. The rest starts here. And God expects us to get along together in harmony, in unity, and that we grow together. I'm not going to go on too much longer, but I do want to go to Galatians. I do want to go to Galatians chapter 5, because this is what God expects us to bring to this Feast of Tabernacles. It's not contention. It's not strife. It's not an ego. It's not pride, hurt feelings. It's none of the above. What God expects from us is verse 22 in chapter 5 of Galatians. But the fruit of the Spirit is love. The very first thing, we are to love one another. We are brothers and sisters in Christ, in God's family. He expects us to love one another at His feast, this feast. Any issues that we may have, we need to put aside. We need to go to the front desk. We need to check them in to the attendant. And you know what? Don't take the number to check it out when you go home. Leave it with him. Don't take it home. Leave it. Get rid of it. What we need, brethren, is the love. God told us in Leviticus that we are to rejoice before Him. Second thing that He wants from us is joy, that we should be happy with one another, that we should love one another, that we should serve one another. There should be a sense of peace among us. There shouldn't never be any quarreling and fighting. There should be a sense of peace. Long-suffering. There should be kindness among all of us here of how we can serve, how we can give to others. There's a sense of goodness, of faithfulness. How about a little kindness, gentleness, and self-control? This is what God expects. This is a place of peace. This is a place of rest. We don't bring the things of the world to this feast. We don't. We come here with love for one another. We come here to rejoice. We come here with our whole hearts, caring about our brothers and sisters. That's what God expects from us. And it starts here tonight. Let's go to one last scripture, then we'll go in for closing, to Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11, in verse 28. Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. He says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn. Did we hear that? Learn from me, he says. For I am gentle, and I'm lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When we obey God, the burden is light. But we have to learn from Christ. That's what he says. We don't have to be heavy laden. We don't have to be weighted down. We should take that yoke from Jesus Christ and learn from him to be gentle, to be lowly in heart. And then, brethren, we have rest. This Feast of Tabernacles is about 1,000 years of rest. These next 8 days is about 8 days of rest for you and I, as brothers and sisters in the family, the extended family of God. I hope you have a very wonderful Feast of Tabernacles. I hope your rest is, and your peace is pleasure to your soul and your well-being. If you have that rest, it will be. Have a good night. I want you to know I love you all. And I look forward to the day when we can literally be in that great kingdom, that new heavens, the new Jerusalem, when God the Father returns. So I hope I can see you there. I hope you see me there. So have a good night.
For more information, go to our website at cogassembly.org. Copyright 2024. Church of God Assembly. All rights reserved.